Okay, good morning, class. This is Mr. Harris with today's presentation. This week, we're going to start learning about Asia, and this week's topic in particular is going to be South Asian geography. Now, we spent a bit of time in Africa, and I wish we honestly had some more time to learn more things about there. But considering how the rest of the year is going to go and the time we have left, I want to make sure we at least covered a couple other places in the world which I think are super duper important. Okay, so we're looking at a population density map of the world, and this is showing us how many people are living in a particular area. The darker the color is the more people, except red is the most amount of people. In the United States, we can see we got a lot of people on the East Coast. We can find Chicago there. I cannot spot Urbana on this map. We see it down here in southern Mexico and in Honduras and Costa Rica, a lot of people on the coast. South America, big empty spaces where the Amazon is, big empty space where the Sahara Desert is and where the Kalahari Desert is, and Australia is mostly an empty space. But let's turn our attention to Asia. And we're going to look mostly this couple of weeks at South Asia, but then we're going to get to East Asia over here. And you can tell just by looking at this map, this is where the most people are. This region up here of northern India into Bangladesh has extreme population density. We all see the same thing here in eastern China through Korea and Japan. The Philippines pretty densely populated as well down here in Indonesia. Another way of looking at this is by something called a cartogram. And a cartogram is a way of graphically representing data, so it kind of scales things down. So if the world was built to fit the same people for every square mile, population density was even, the world would look something like this. America actually got a bit smaller, even though we're the third biggest country in the world. Mexico gets larger. And then we move over here. Nigeria gets a much bigger, but then you'll notice right away our Asian giants. India is now the second biggest thing on this map, only smaller than China, but not by a whole lot. Pakistan as well grows greatly in size, as does Bangladesh, which we'll talk a lot about. And then we see Japan's even so much bigger, as is the Philippines. So a lot more people are living in Asia than anywhere else. And this is one of my favorite images. It just shows, population of the world, that there are more people who live inside this circle than outside of it. So the populations of just South, Southeast, and East Asia are more than the rest of the world combined. Now, we're going to separate Asia into kind of different regions in this unit, and we've already talked a bit about Southwest Asia, aka the Middle East. So I'm going to focus probably the next couple of weeks on South Asia and then East Asia. I love Southeast Asia. I've spent time in Thailand. My wife spent a lot of time in Vietnam, and I'm also part Filipino, but I'm not sure we're going to have a chance to get to them this semester. Maybe I'll give you some summer work to do about Southeast Asia. But we're going to focus mostly on what we call over here South Asia. And we're going to include the countries of Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the Maldives. Tibet is not technically a country. It used to be a nation and then it was conquered by the Communist Party of China. So now today it's part of China, but sometimes people include it for historical reasons and also for cultural reasons. So, South Asia, the region we're talking about, is oftentimes called the Indian subcontinent. What is a subcontinent? It's usually a region that's separated from the rest of the continent by physical features, and it's kind of distinct on its own. And if we look here at this elevation map we have in front of us and compare India to China, we can kind of see this giant spike in elevation, and this is the Himalayan mountains, okay? And then the Himalayan mountains go into Tibet, which is a giant elevated region, and then eventually falling back down again. To travel from China to India is extremely difficult. India and China actually have beef these days over a number of different issues, and you think, well, they have beef, they share a border, that could lead to war, right? Well, hopefully not. There's been some small scale skirmishes, But because the border between these two countries is so barren and remote, it's not considered that big a deal day in, day out. And it's extremely difficult to bring people to the border. You have to hike through mountains and stuff to get there. So this is South Asia, also called the Indian subcontinent. And we call it that as well because of its geographic history. So we see up here this purple that's over the top. This is the Himalayan mountain ranges. Okay, this is the very high elevation. Then it goes down a little bit, and then peninsular India is low elevation where most people are living. Now, the Himalayan mountain ranges are extraordinary. They're the biggest mountain range in the entire world as far as the size of their mountains, and they contain the tallest mountain in the world, which is Mount Everest. And Mount Everest is 29,029 feet tall, or excuse me, above sea level is the height of that mountain. How many miles is that? Remember, there's 5,280 feet in a mile. I'll let you guys figure it out. Okay. And the Himalayas are cool because they're still growing every year. They're moving about 0.5 millimeters, which is like half a centimeter, I believe is the height they're growing every year. And how are these Himalayas formed? Hopefully, you guys remember learning about this in your science classes before and in social studies. Plate tectonics, okay, which is the movement of continental plates over time. Think of the world as kind of having a bunch of different, let's think of dinner plates sitting on it that are all kind of touching each other and they're always shifting and moving around, trying to shove each other out of the way. Well, India used to be its own floating island, okay, a little small continent thing like Australia. Then slowly over time, it moved northward and it crashed into Eurasia, crashed into what is, China and Kazakhstan and those countries up there above it. And when it crashed into it, it started this process of forming these mountain ranges. If you think of maybe or a deck of playing cards cut in half, as they go towards each other, they start to bridge up as you're trying to shuffle them. So India kind of went underneath this new continent range and started driving it upwards. So these mountain ranges have been created by the movement of India over time. And there's a lot of different mountains in this range, and they think it's going to be in 10 million years a mile further into Asia, which makes these mountains even taller. Now, a little bit of Mount Everest trivia. The first people that we know made it to the top, and we highly doubt ancient people made it up there, was two guys. One of them was named Sir Edmund Hillary from New Zealand. He paid for it. And then his Sherpa, and Sherpa actually has a double meaning. It's the name of a people that live in this region, as well as the title of like guide up a mountain. So the Sherpa's name was Tenzing Norgay, and he did most of the work. And together, they summited the mountain in 1953. I want to make sure both their names are up there. Sometimes only Edmund gets credit for it. And since then, over 6,000 people have made it to the top of Mount Everest. However, about 200 people have lost their lives on the mountain along the way. So you're looking at about a 3% death rate if you want to try climbing Mount Everest. And a lot of people want to try climbing Mount Everest. This is actually the summit here you see with the people holding their hands in victory at the top of it. And this is the line of people who are waiting to get their photo next. And there's only a brief window of about 3 weeks every year when the conditions are right for people to actually make this ascent and summit the mountains. So you actually have hundreds of people waiting around in base camps who then are led by tour guides up the mountains to take them there. You can do it from the Chinese side for as little as I think $20,000, but usually if you want to go up Everest, it's going to cost you around $80,000 to do it the correct way of good trainers and guides. And you better come in physical shape because, like I said before, people die every year, and a lot of people that start the journey don't make it to the top. You have to consider the extreme effects of oxygen elevation, and some of the bodies are too difficult to move down the mountain, so they're still up there. Yeah. A little bit more of Himalayan trivia. K2 is the second highest mountain in the world. You've probably heard of it before. It's only about 800 feet shorter than Mount Everest, but Mount Everest gets all the glory. And it's also been climbed, but it's actually considered to be more difficult to summit than Mount Everest. And much fewer climbers have gone up this mountain. Here are a couple images of the Himalayas from space, so you can see the scale of this mountain range. Looks so beautiful. And if we look at the rest of South Asia, so that's kind of the hat, the lid that disconnects the Indian subcontinent or South Asia from the rest of the world, we can see that it's usually very hot and very humid in most of the country. So we think about tropical being in that right region underneath the Tropic of Cancer, hot and wet. Look how much of the country down here, especially, is wet and hot. We also have a mixture in some of these regions. We do have a little bit of desert, and this is up here mostly in what is the country of Pakistan. So there is desert over there. In the north, we have humid subtropical, so again, very wet and pretty hot most of the year. The vegetation, a lot of grassland covers it in places people aren't farmer. There is some mixed forest, a little bit of tropical rainforest and stuff like that, but a lot of grassland. And this is, think of India, you think of elephants that live in this grassland, as well as a lot of tigers as well. And there are actually quite a few tigers still left in India, but we'll talk about that. And maybe at some other point in time, we'll talk about how hundreds of people are still killed by tigers. Some more about the climate of India and South Asia. It's dominated by the monsoons, okay? And monsoons are these winds that actually change direction a couple times a year. So you see, we've got the northeast winds represented by the gold arrows on the side, and those happen during what they call their winter time. It is colder there, but it's not quite the same as we experience here in Urbana. And then we also have the southwest or summer winds that actually come in. And with the wind, it brings rainfall, okay? And it's the reason why we have so much rainfall in South Asia, but it sometimes also brings storms with it. So the summer monsoon, a lot of people think of monsoon as being like a rainstorm. It's actually the wind, but that's why people associate it with that. And if we look around the world at who gets the most precipitation, which is rainfall and snow mixed together, let's focus over here on South Asia. And this is Eastern India and Bangladesh here that are getting all of this rain, and most of India gets a lot of rain as well. We also get quite a bit of rain here in central Illinois, which is one of the reasons why our crops are so fertile as well. But there's definitely a connection between the amount of rainfall and how many people can live in a region. With all that rainfall, it breeds healthy rivers, and it also means that crops will always have enough moisture for them to live on. India itself, again, very, very rainy. We're looking at, oh, I'm really bad at this kind of math, about 200 centimeters, which we're looking at almost 100 inches of rain a year. So that's quite a bit. Okay. I want to talk about a couple of other places. We've got our offshore islands. And the first one I want to mention is Sri Lanka. Okay. And Sri Lanka is an island right off the eastern coast of India. And it's got 22 million people. Very tropical, very hot there. And it has its own deep, rich history. There was a brutal civil war that went on there during a lot of the 70s, 80s, and 90s between two different ethnic groups. If you guys are familiar with the hip hop artist MIA, who that song Paper Planes, her family is actually from Sri Lanka. We also have this place called the Maldives, which is a chain of islands, also known as an archipelago, that is off the western coast of India and to the south. And if you add up the square mileage, there's only about 115 square miles total, which if you think that's 11 and a half by 10 square miles. But in that region lives 515,000 people. Very small for a country, but that's a lot on these islands, and their capital city is Malé over here that you see. So all these little islands. Now I want to talk about these Maldives because it's one of the subjects of the work that you guys will be looking at this week. They are some of the most beautiful places on earth, and there's a huge tourism industry there. But I want you to notice How far is that land above the water? Doesn't look very far above the water to me. And besides tourists who live there, there's also lots of regular people who are not on vacation. And so this is the most populated island you see here of buildings and stuff like that. And then we also have a lot of people living on some of these islands in these slum-like conditions. So there is a lot of poverty in the Maldives as not everyone's making money off the tourism industry. And still, do that land look very far above the water? Okay, so a couple of other things you guys should know about is the important river systems. We've got three main river systems, the Indus, the Ganges, and the Brahmaputra River. And they're kind of the most important things to people in northern India, as well as Pakistan and over here in Bangladesh. And most of them have their sources where they begin is from glaciers melting in the Himalayas. With climate change, that could possibly mean less water coming from these glaciers as well. So we've got these river systems that come in and feed them, and they're very central to Indian life. The Ganges River is especially holy to Hindus, although there's lots of religious ceremonies that are associated with all of these rivers. And these rivers are in high use. So we see lots of people using them for transportation. Unfortunately, they've had a lot of pollution issues, although they are doing some work on that these days to try to clean up these rivers a little bit more. And then again, people pray in these rivers. Some people ceremonially bathe themselves in these rivers. So it's very important that we actually try to take good care of them. Now, these rivers, besides being religiously important, are also extremely economically important. The rivers create this area of land called alluvial plains, which are filled with rich soil. Okay, if we think of the Nile River, it floods every year, makes that rich farmland around it, allows for massive amounts of people to live there. That's the same thing in India with these river systems. So the very rich farmland that comes from it, and what we call the Indo-Gangetic Plain, is one of the most fertile farming regions in the world. Okay, with fertile land, cheap food, big populations. Historically, India's had some of the lowest wages in the world, or the amount of money you have to pay somebody, because the food has always been so cheap there. And this is a soil map. You can kind of look at India there. What you really want is that kind of powder blue stuff, that baby blue stuff here. That's the best kind of soil. The other soil, the pink here, most of the places is not too bad. And this blue stuff is all throughout Bangladesh as well. That's the most rich kind of soil you can have. And we see giant amounts of that in in India. And here we see kind of how alluvial soil is made. This is a floodplain. So we got that glacial meltwater plus all the rainwater swells these rivers up. They carry with them rich soil. They spread out and flood and leave that rich soil behind here on the coast. Great areas for farming, unless this land is lost due to rising sea levels. And if we look at the most densely populated areas in the world, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. Our top three are all in South Asia. Okay, comparing that to others, we can see the US is way down at the bottom compared to Bangladesh. And with this population density, that means crowding, crowding, crowding. So this is a picture from Bangladesh, and on the left-hand side, these are people trying to use the train to get from place to place, but there's not enough room for everyone, so they're riding on top. And then on the right, this is actually from the Indian city of Mumbai, and this is one of their sprawling slums that you can see there. So they do have quite a bit of natural resources as far as the land and the water. They have enough food to feed their giant populations. They do have, some forests for timbers and other things. They got some natural minerals and resources, but importantly, they don't have a lot of oil in this region. So they're dependent on importing from other countries. So that's a little bit about South Asian geography. And this week, for your assignments, we're going to be looking at how climate change is affecting Bangladesh and the Maldives. So the assignments this week, there is an online South Asia map practice. So there's a website, I think it's a Cetera one that I created, where you have to make sure you know where the different places are in South Asia. Then we have an article on Bangladesh and climate change, and there's some questions that go with it. There's also a video on climate change in the Maldives with some questions, about a 15-minute video. And then for extra credit this week, I'm going to have you guys create a map of South Asia. So I put up what I want on it, and it's going to be up to you guys to, either print out an outline and then do it that way, or just do it by hand to make me a map of South Asia. That's why I'm making it for extra credit, but make sure you include all the things that I put on there. And, I know some of you guys are great artists. Some of you guys might be bored. Make me an awesome map of South Asia. All right, guys, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great week.